Hello and welcome to PlayStation Racer. My name is Mitchell Morgan and this is the second of two videos in which I am looking at Telemetry Racing's telemetry capture software for Gran Turismo. In the first video we looked at how you can download the software, install it and configure it so that it will pull the data through from your PlayStation. In this video I'm going to be looking at analysing a number of laps. First of all, a single lap. Then we'll overlay two of our laps together to see how consistent we are, and then we'll go a little bit better and we'll download one of the fastest BMW laps this week and we'll see how we compare to that. That's all in this video. Let's get right into it right now. Before I actually get into collecting the data of a lap and also analysing it, it's probably worthwhile that we just have a quick look around the interface. This is the dashboard interface. So you can see at the top here there are three steering wheels. The one on the left hand side will show you the estimated steering input from your reference lap. The white steering wheel will show you your current steering inputs. And the dark cyan represents an estimated steering angle 1 second into the future. You've then got your revs that you are running from green to blue. The main area here is showing your throttle inputs in green and your brake inputs in red. We then have your current speed in white and cyan, the reference lap speed, and then the gear, again, white for your lap and cyan for the reference lap. We then have the delta, the fuel, and also your tyre temperatures. That information is basically being collected in real time while you are racing in a race with your software connected to your PS5, or also when you are watching a replay. That's really important because you want to be collecting data about your races, but also it enables you to collect data about other people's races from replays. And we'll see that in just a moment. Okay, so I'm going to use Daily Race B this week, which just happens to be at Dragon Trail Seaside. And I'm in the BMW M6. What you're seeing on the screen at the moment are images from two devices. The main game footage is coming straight out of the PS5, and then I've overlaid that with the Telemetry Racing software window, which is running on my laptop, and then in the video editing software I've just brought them together for ease. So what I tend to do is I'll run up the Telemetry Racing software and I'll have that running on my laptop. I'll then start my hot lap or my race, and I'll just look across and I'll make sure that the graphical information is coming through, all of the telemetry data is coming through, and so long as you can see the graphs going up and down and the rev counter going up and down, then you know that the software is collecting that data and saving it away to use later. At this point I can just get on with doing my race or doing my hot laps or just reviewing the replay, whatever I'm using as my source. In this instance I just ran 2 or 3 laps so that I can use those to analyse 2 laps over the top of each other and just see how consistent or inconsistent I was. Let's go and have a look at that right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is to analyse one of my laps. To do that I'm going to go into lap analysis, and in here we are presented with a window with a number of empty graphs and some buttons to navigate left and right, to zoom in and zoom out, etc. But the first thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to go into select my lap to analyse, and I've got a lot of laps in here. The first one I can tell you is one of the fastest laps in the world. I'm not going to worry about that at all. And then the second option in here was the 4 laps that I just did when I was just had the video running just a moment ago. That's these laps. And I'm going to take my quickest lap and I'm going to load that into the software. And that immediately populates the window with this information, which is the delta. Obviously we've only got 1 lap, so there's no delta time at the moment. We'll come back to that in a moment. We've got our brake data, we've got our throttle, we've got the steering wheel inputs, we've got the speed, we've got the gear that we chose and when we made the gear change, we've got our fuel, we've got our tyres, the front left, front right, right left and right rear. And then over the right hand side we've got a map showing exactly where we are on the map, or where the data correlates to the map. So for instance, if I just go up to the top here, and the other thing I should point out is that there are some shortcut keys here for those of you that like shortcut keys. The control and mouse scroll will zoom in and out. So if I do control and I use my mouse, you can see that that's now zooming in and out of the data on the lap. I can also use shift and the mouse scroll wheel to scroll left and right. I've got a right click that will zoom out the entire lap, and a left click and drag which will enable me to select a region, which is quite a useful one. So I can just do the left click and drag and just say, okay, I just want to analyze that part of the lap. And then you'll see over here that there's a red line that is showing the part of the lap that we are going to be looking at. And the little green dot here shows where we are. And as I move around on the graph, then you'll see that that is all going to change as well. So let me just go back out to the wide angle for the moment, and we'll have a look and see what we are looking at here. So with regards to the delta, we've only got one lap loaded, so there is no delta information. For the brake, you could see how our brake inputs are throughout the lap. And as I'm moving through the graph here, you can see the little green dot is moving around on the screen as well. And you can see how hard I'm braking, where I'm braking, etc. throughout this particular lap. Now what we can do is we can come down to the chicane of death, for instance. Okay, so what I want to do here is I just want to analyze out the chicane of death. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag through the chicane of death part, and that will then zoom in. And you can see also I've got a red line now showing the part of the lap that we are going to be analysing. And then if I just bring the mouse over the graph, don't touch any of the buttons because it will reset everything. You can go through and you can just move your mouse through this whole section. So you can see me approaching the chicane of death. I then change up into 5th gear, I think it is at that point. You can see that on the throttle, where I'm coming fully off the throttle for the gear change. And as we then go through the chicane of death, you can see with the brake and the throttle inputs here that I come off with the throttle and I apply a bit of brake. Then I apply a little bit more throttle, but then I put a little bit of brake in, fully off the brake, back on the throttle, but then I do actually touch the brake a little bit with full throttle as we're coming out of the chicane of death. So you can see there at some points I'm actually just riding the brakes whilst I'm also on the throttle and coming off. In particular, and probably not very good, I've got full throttle and I've still got a very small amount of brake input. It's not a lot, just to balance the car as we came through the exit of the chicane on this particular instance. And that's probably because I felt that I was going towards the wall at quite a rate of knots. And then you can see I've got another gear change there. So if we just come back through, you can see the wheel inputs. You can also see the speed. But more importantly, you can see the gear change. So if I just bring both of those on the screen together, you can see here that I've got a gear change where I'm going from gear 4 up to gear 5. And you can see at the bottom there, it's telling me which gear it is. And then as we come through and out of the chicane of death, so halfway down the left-hand curve, you can see I then go up into 6th gear. So that's how I analyse a single lap. Let's go and add an additional lap and put one over the other and just see how inconsistent I really am. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go back into the menu and I'm going to select reference analysis lap. And I'm now going to choose the next fastest lap, so this one here. So I'm going to load that. And then what that will now do is it will put both of the laps over each other. It's reset it, so I'm looking at the whole of the lap here. But you can see now that we've got our delta, so we can see the difference between the two laps. You can also see here that we've got our brake inputs and how they are different between the two lap times. We'll have a look at the chicane of death in just a moment. Also the throttle inputs, etc. So this is a great way of seeing just how inconsistent you are, and in particular with the gears, because very often I don't use the same gear all the time. And this is quite interesting here that we can just look at, because most of my gears are the same. You can see here that I dropped on one of the lap times down an additional gear and then straight back up. Otherwise, fairly consistent through this part. Here, I changed up much earlier than I did on the other lap. Now, the only criticism I've got here is it's a bit difficult to tell which of the two laps are which is the reference one and which is the non-reference one. I guess you can tell from when you actually change up. So at the moment we're both in gear 4 here. And as I get to this part here, the reference lap we've now gone up into gear 5, but we're still in gear 4 for our analysis lap. And then at this point, we are now both in gear 5 for both of them. So it would be nice, I think, if all of these graphs were basically maybe just red and yellow, so very contrasting colours, and there was a little key that showed me which was which. So for the reference lap at the bottom there, it would be colour coded accordingly, but that's something I can talk to the author about. So just coming up to the chicane of death that we worked on just a moment ago, let's just drag through there again, and then we'll have a little look at this one. So you can see the delta, very, very similar. With regards to the brake input, it's very interesting that on the reference lap, I actually broke on the way into the chicane of death, whereas I didn't on the analysis lap. And you could see, though, that when we went through the actual chicane itself, whereas on the original lap, I was braking, then off the brake a little bit, and then fully off the brake, and then back on the brake, I was much more in control of the braking because it was a lot smoother. So that's what I would like to be seeing in my brake, that more smooth brake as we're coming out of the chicane of death. And likewise, you can see with the throttle inputs, the gear selection was very close, not exactly the same place that I changed gear. And then as we came off the throttle, you can see that I was a little bit more consistent with my throttle input for the analysis lap, I think, than the reference one. This is where I'm getting a little bit confused, but you can see that the darker yellowy green color is slightly better because I come off, then hold it, then I come off, whereas the light green one, I'm a lot more erratic with my acceleration. Also, I had a little lift on the exit there, and then as we came out of this little sequence, you can see that I changed up a little bit sooner with the light green than the dark green. So this is showing some of the inconsistencies within my lap, and you can see here as well the gear changes where I was slightly more inconsistent through there as well. And then you've got the tyre information, which I don't fully understand what information you're being shown there, but that's sort of fairly consistent between the two laps. It's more the brake and the throttle and the gear inputs that I'm interested in particular the gears, because I am very often picked up on the fact that sometimes I will go into a corner in one gear and another time I'll go into a corner in a different gear. So if I just zoom out of there at the moment, for instance, if we were to pick up this little sequence here, if I can just find that, let me just go back up to the top. Let's move the cursor around. So this little sequence right here, I think it is. Let me just drag through. That will do. You can see here that the brake for this chicane, I brake pretty much in the same place to 100%. And on one of the laps, I came off the brake a little bit early, but then I had to brake a bit early, a bit more midway through the corner, which wasn't quite so good. Whereas with the red lap, my trail braking was a lot better. It was a lot smoother through there, where the yellow one was a little bit erratic. The throttle inputs, well, to be quite honest, all over the place. There's not an awful lot to be said about that, other than must work harder. And then you can see here the gear selection. I was a little bit all over the place, including as we go into the corner on the light green, I came all the way down to gear 2, and on the darker green I stayed in gear 3, and I believe it was the gear 3 one that was the quicker of the 2 laps. So that's how you can analyze 2 of your own laps together. But where this gets really exciting is where you put your lap over one of the fastest guys in the world. Let's go and have a look at that. So to analyse our lap against a fast lap, we need to load up a fast lap. We've already got our own, so we don't need to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into this daily race, and I'm going to navigate through to find the fastest BMW replay that I can. I'm going to load up that replay, and then we're going to watch that with the telemetry software running. So I'm just going to play that replay. I'm just going to set on some of the information so we can see what's going on. And then I've got the main game footage being displayed in the main part of the window, and then I've got the telemetry software overlaid so you can see what's going on. And literally all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to watch through the whole of this replay. Now it's very important that you don't pause or rewind or do anything with these replays whilst they are running, otherwise it will mess up the data. You need to just set them running and then leave them alone. And I tend to like using the chase cam so that I can see exactly where the car is being positioned, especially when I'm watching one of the fast replays. I can see how they're apexing the corners, I can see where they're turning in, where they're braking, etc. with the brake lights. So I find that to be quite useful. And then all we do is we just leave this running all the way through the lap to the end. And then when we get to the end, we can simply close out of the replay and go back to the laptop and then review the information. So let's go and do that now. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go into select the analysis lap, which is going to be my lap, and I'm going to pick my fastest lap. And I'm also going to grab a reference lap, which is going to be one of the fastest guys in the world. So they've done a 1:35.6. Let's load that one up, and we'll see how we do compared to them. And I'm going to leave the leave it pretty much open so we can see the whole of the lap. And if I just go up to the top, then you can see with my brake, so which is mine and which is theirs. That's the only thing that gets me a little bit confused with this. I do need to work this out. So the brake at 100%, I'm going to... Oh. So the reference lap, I think, is going to be the fastest lap time, I would imagine. So you can see here that I'm going 100% of the brake, and then I come off the brake very quickly, whereas the more performant lap, let me just go into this so we can see this a little bit better, a little bit clearer. There we go. So you can see, I think this is me, I'm the red. So I hit the brakes very hard, I hold the brake, and then I trail brake off, not very well, but fairly quickly. Whereas the racer that's got the quicker lap time, they're introducing the brake a lot more smoothly, and they hold the brake for a lot less time than I do, and then trail brake off a lot better all the way down to zero brake. So you can see how I need to work on applying the brake more smoothly and then releasing the brake more smoothly on the way through. And this is that first corner that we're analysing at the moment. The throttle inputs, well, that's quite interesting. You can see that, let me just pick up where we are. So my throttle input, I think that the reference lap, let me just come back here. Yeah, the reference lap is going to be the darker colour. And there's not an awful lot for me to say, really, other than my throttle is on, then it's off, and then it's on. There's 2 dabs of throttle where I'm off, I'm just coasting, so they're putting a little bit of throttle on where I'm not. They're then getting some throttle there where I'm not. I'm not full throttle here where they are, and they're holding, so you can see where they're getting more throttle inputs and gaining more time through this particular corner. And then you can see that I'm putting the power down and then coming off, then more power, then I'm coming right off, and then more power, whereas they are putting the power down a lot more quicker. Then they're just rolling through the corner a little bit and then back on to the full power. I think also, if I come down to the gears, you can see the difference with the gears, and you can see that I think that they are, where are we? So I think I'm in gear 6, whereas they're holding gear 5 through the corner. And then as I come down to 5, they're going 4. They're going to 3. So you can see how much later I'm changing down the gears. They come down to 2. They then come down to... I'm just zoomed in a little bit here. So I'm in 3. They then come down into gear 2, and I hold gear 2, whereas they come down to 1. Let me just zoom out of that again just a little bit. So they use gear 1 for a lot of the way through the corner, whereas midway through the corner I'm coming up to gear 3. So this is fascinating to see how the difference in gears are between myself and the fastest racer. But this is just an example of how you can view your lap time. Let's just zoom right out. And you can see through all of these graphs, the steering inputs, the throttle inputs, the brake inputs, how they are changing throughout the lap between myself and the main racer, the fast racer. If we just look at the chicane of death that we were looking at earlier on, you can see with regards to the brake, that the quick lap time, there is absolutely no brake put at all through that chicane of death whatsoever. In fact, if we look at the throttle, then you can see that that racer lifts midway through the chicane of death, and then as we come out of it, there's another lift just there, and then he gets back on to the throttle. And I'm coming off the throttle towards the end. So let's just zoom out that again. I just zoomed in to have a look. But you can see the different throttle trace is fascinating between the two of us. And of course I had the little lift on the way out where I was worried about hitting the wall where they didn't. And you can see here that they're on full throttle at this point. So way before I am, where I'm still lifting on the way through, they're on full throttle. So they can carry much more of that speed through the rest of the lap. Anyway, I've found this really fascinating, the different ways that you can analyse laps. We've looked at analysing one of our own. We've looked at analysing 2 of our own laps. And then finally, we went through and recorded a fastest lap and then analysed that out as well. I hope that you found this video useful. If you have, please hit the like button. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you on another video coming very soon. For now, take care. Bye-bye.